Our guest today is the founder and CEO of Activate Group. He's a speaker and the best-selling author of Your Business is a Leaky Bucket. Howard Shore has worked with hundreds of executives and teams to help accelerate their growth and scale their organizations. He cut his teeth as the owner of several successful companies and as an executive for 3 top Fortune 500 companies, so the transition to business and executive coaching was a natural one. He's a certified Gazelles coach, a certified public accountant, a certified executive coach, a certified behavioral analyst, certified value analyst, a certified attribute index analyst. He's earned both his bachelor and MBA degrees from Florida International University. And in addition, he completed advanced executive programs at Harvard Law School and the University of Chicago. And it's with great pleasure that we bring him here with you today to have a conversation with you guys. Howard, I'll turn it over to you and we'll open it up for Q&A at the end.
All right, I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Jeff. So I'm gonna just play off of your boat analogy, and as we're going through this today, I want everyone to think about the fact that we're all in the same storm. Many of you that are listening to this are in different boats. So the way this storm is affecting you is very different. And I recognize that as I go through, but there's a certain mindset that regardless of what boat you're in, the stuff I'm going to teach you today is essential for success. So whether it was Corona time or not, we would be needing to talk about these topics. So the first thing I want you to think about today is, what would you do if you had an extra $1 million tomorrow? And as you think about that, I want you to realize that there is $1 million hiding, at least $1 million hiding in every single business. And I've got the treasure map to help you guys find that. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. You see, I truly believe that every company has more revenue and profits than you, the leader, have ever imagined. And the key will be your ability to implement and expand your leadership operating system. I also believe that by mastering an operating system, you can actually accelerate that $1 million, and you could have less stress even during these times and find more time to do the things that are important to you. So today I'm gonna take you through kind of a super tool. And what this tool, it comes from our business acceleration system, does for companies. It helps a leadership team get together every quarter and find more cash. And all you have to do is focus on the right priorities. So just to kind of get us started and make sure you're all awake, type in your chat box, hey, I'm in, I'm really into this. All right, awesome. So we got some answers. At least I see some of you are not multitasking too much. That's important. All right, so let's start off with a story. So I'll never forget when David Rosen came to me. He's the CEO of Cura Labs. And he was super excited because his company over the last 12 months had just grown 52%. So he's really proud of that revenue. But I give David a lot of credit because he realized that revenue wasn't everything. And things weren't quite going the way he had hoped. So first of all, while his leadership team got along and were very friendly with each other, he was dealing with a lot of drama that was just not helpful. In addition to that, he had expected that as he grew, his net profit margin would grow substantially, and it didn't. So he came to me because he's like, Howard, there's got to be a better way to do this. I'm working my butt off, and I'm just not getting the traction I thought. And you see, and you guys heard my credentials earlier, I could really appreciate where David had been. I had been there and find myself there at times today. And what I realized was, as I looked back, and I was proud of all of the accomplishments that you guys heard of earlier, the reality was I was not as good a leader as I had thought. And if I was honest, I personally was hard to work with. My communication skills were not where they needed to be, and I definitely was not unlocking the potential of my team. So I too went out and sought a better way. And what came out of that was this business acceleration system and tools, which I then shared with David at Kira. And what we quickly did with the leadership team is we helped them reframe their strategy, not a lot, just a little. We helped them figure out how to get the right people on the right seats. We got everyone in the company focused on just a few priorities. And then we put in what I would almost call a hyper accountability system to make sure the stuff we talked about was happening. And the results is what you're seeing on the screen. So they had a negative $200,000 of cash flow, even though they had that big growth. And 1 year later, they had a business that generated over $2 million of cash flow. More importantly, we took this business that had 4.6% net profit and moved it to a 20% net profit business. And the key that I want you all to understand, and as you're going to see as I talk today, it doesn't take big moves to make this happen. So I'm going to simplify everything I share with you, and I'm going to narrow it down. And basically, so first of all, I'm all about results. And more importantly, what we've kind of mastered is how do I get a lot more results with less employees? You know, after all, 60 to 70% of most businesses' investments, I don't like to call them expenses, are in people. So if we can grow a lot faster with less money, I'm sure all of you guys would want to know how to do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a tool and show you the 21 ways in which you can change your cash story. Every quarter, you can keep improving it. And more importantly, I think it'll be clear to you what actions you can take after leaving this meeting. And I already want to call you and give you notice. I'm going to ask you at the end to identify one idea that you're going to apply today that's going to generate you more cash. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of folks walk out of here with $1 million worth of ideas, even in 45 minutes time. So I'm going to start with open mind. And actually, open mind is not just for today listening to me. It's every day you lead. And the challenge I'm going to have for you is the last time you had a complete open mind was when you were born. And ever since, we're all screwing it up. And the reason is the more success we have, the more knowledge we think we have, and so on, causes us to kind of put blinders on. See, the brain works to try to be efficient. We want to make faster decisions. And we want things to go much easier. And so we cloud out the data that's in front of us. And some examples that I would have is, our employees come into our office, they've got a great idea, and we're like, we've already seen that. We got this, and we don't even hear them out. And you leave a lot of opportunity on the table when you do that. But even things like knowledge versus belief. So it was knowledge at one point that the world was flat until we learned that it was not. We thought that the universe revolved around the earth until we found out it's not. Even something like running a 4-minute mile, we used to believe that was impossible. And then it wasn't. So my challenge to you today is I'm going to share with you a lot of things that you may have already heard, but you're not fully implementing around. And usually those are the best ideas. Is you have the knowledge, but you're not applying it. And then I'm sure there'll be 1 or 2 nuggets today that you never applied before. And this is where your $1 million opportunities are. So to start with this open mind concept, I'm going to share with you, if we go back to elementary school, we had learned 1 + 1 + 1 always equal 3. And yet I'm now going to show you an opportunity where this is not true, and it's actually never true. See, I've looked at thousands of financial statements over the years. And one of the things that I learned was that if we grow revenue by 1%, we expand gross margin by 1%, and reduce selling, general, and administrative expenses by 1%, 1 + 1 + 1 equals a lot more than 3. So this is Kira's results, the company I shared with you earlier. So they were just at about $10 million of revenue, and thinking, God, we just got to keep throwing lots of revenue in here. And what they figured out is they can grow their bottom line by 42% just by making these small adjustments in how they lead, how they manage, and what they focus on. And as you saw, there was $1.5 million of opportunity just in profit alone in a given year by them having an open mind. And what the leadership team realized was they never would have found the $1.5 million sitting on their income statement. You see, the problem with accounting is it only captures transactions. It doesn't capture poor leadership, our leadership mistakes. And that's what this team found. They found if they were going to actually get the results that we could see were possible, they were going to have to become better leaders and better master the habits that I was sharing with them that day. And so going back to the financial statements, one of the problems I had as an accountant and still have today when I look at the P&Ls of my 3 companies is there's lots of line items and it's super complicated, and I'm going to demystify that for you today. But what I was clear is because accounting only captures transactions, it doesn't show us where the real opportunity is. For example, there is no financial statement line item for not having a strategy or having a poor one. There's no financial statement line item for hiring the wrong people and keeping them. Nowhere does it show us the cost of keeping those people. It also doesn't show us the cost of our process mistakes. And in every business, and I'm going to already put the gauntlet out with this tool I'm going to share with you today and give you access to, we have never had a business, regardless of size, fill out that calculator and not find $1 million. And it was all leadership mistakes. And I'm going to tell you, in my business, my book, my first book, Your Business is a Leaky Bucket, we identified 15 problems that we have found in every single business, whether they were startup or 20 billion in revenue. They all had these 15 leaks in different degrees, and it was all leadership. So I'm going to share with you how to apply that today, and let's get going. So the first topic I want to challenge you to learn how to master is forecasting. One of the things we've seen in almost every company that we've worked in is forecasting is not only not a talent, it's something that they don't even really spend much time doing. And having been the head of strategy of a $20 billion company, I learned firsthand how important it was to become much better at forecasting this quarter, this 6 months, this year, and really being able to forecast the next 3 years. And our clients that have the biggest exits are the ones that are able to build a business that they can actually make predictable. And forecasting helps us see that. So I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, and right now with COVID, you're like, who the hell could plan COVID? Obviously we can't. And if I sat here and I told you, God, you should have seen this coming, you'd think I was nuts, right? But there are a lot of things that should be forecasted that we don't think about when we're looking and planning our businesses. For example, we knew a recession was coming. We just didn't know when, and this accelerated it. We know there are trends and changes in our market, and we ignore them because we're comfortable. We're doing good enough. But I'm going to tell you, there's always a lot of data points there. There are a lot of things for you to look externally and even internally to help you realize that many times when you put your 1-year goals down, it's fluff. There isn't substance behind it. You haven't thought through how you're going to change, for example, lead generation, which is essential for you to hit your revenue number. And you haven't come up with a specific initiative that's going to move that number. So it's just a wish. We have found that you can make your company highly predictable. And usually there's only 3, and in most cases, 5 drivers in every single business you need to find. And then once you've identified that driver, you've got to debate amongst the team. How are you going to move that and make that critical number more predictable? So let's make this real and let's make it present. So I sit and I'm in a CEO group myself. And one of the CEOs just shared how he pivoted in an industry that you would think is getting decimated right now. He's in the events business, and he runs 12 to 15 major events every year. And so COVID comes along, and all of a sudden he finds out an event where he's collected all this cash up front and has his deposits out and everything. It's a $5 million event. And all of a sudden, canceled, no revenue. Well, what a lot of leaders have done is if they put their heads in their sand, they went on defense. And don't get me wrong, we need to have defense in our plans, but we also need to have offense. So he went harder on offense than he did defense. And he sat down with his team and he said, listen, I give everybody on this team of 50 employees 30 days to figure out how to become a virtual events company. And I want to keep at least 80% of the deposits we've already collected and get the people that were going to participate to stay in. And so what they did in 30 days was amazing, but it's because they forecasted it and he refused to give up his money. And I'm proud to say my colleague, he not only pulled off the game, he had 1,100 people attend. He generated more revenue than he was going to do in his live event, and was a hell of a lot more profitable. And even more important, through April, and because he started out, and I'll be honest, he was having a record year, he's already generated more money in an events business through April than he did all of last year. So my challenge to you is you got to create a forecast, and then you got to fight with the team, set a vision and set a plan to go after it. And that's where we find our $1 million. We don't sit there and just cut our costs and hope it's going to do. So now I'm going to take you through that 21 ways where every one of you can find cash every quarter. And it's going to take some offense, folks. There's some defense in here, but it's mostly offense. And I'm going to take you through the structure of this, but honestly, because of time, normally I'd work you all through this. I'd have you do an exercise that we go back and forth. We'd share what you're coming out with. All I want to do is just give you the flavor, and then I'll give you what you need in the end. So you can either do this on your own, or I'll offer you some other ways in which you can get help. So first of all, I want you to realize that there's only 7 ways to improve your financial statements. 4 ways on your P&L, and 3 ways on your balance sheet. So let's start with your, and P&L's income statement. Everybody uses profit and loss, different ways to define what I'm talking about. But let's start with the income statement. So there's only 2 ways you can increase revenue. Forget about all the line items, the products and services. You can either increase volume or you can increase price, period. Volume goes down, revenue goes down. Volume goes up, you're in better shape, right? Now, I am going to tell you that price is more powerful than volume. And we actually did that at Cure Labs. So what happens is when you increase volume, your cost of sales comes right off of that. Then your cost of your direct costs also come off of that, which gives you a lower net. When it comes to price, the only thing that comes off of that top line growth is the cost of commissions, because your direct costs have already been covered. So huge opportunity is price. Then we're going to move further down your income statement. And even though there's lots of line items again, your job is to reduce direct cost as a percentage of revenue and reduce overhead, selling, general, and administrative expenses as a percentage of revenue. That's it. And so here's the thing that I want you to realize is most companies are not doing a good job, and hopefully all of you that are listening to this are doing a good job of separating your direct cost from your overhead costs. And the reason I say that is direct cost, if you have your business model working well, should consistently move with revenue. And if your revenue drops, then obviously you know how much direct cost to take out. And if it's growing, you know how much to add. And it should move pretty consistently unless you improve your business model. And then overhead, Jeff mentioned scale. We traditionally get scale by not growing our overhead, selling, general, and administrative expenses as quickly as we grow revenue. Actually, it should grow slower. So that's percent should keep shrinking. And when it doesn't, you don't get scale, you just get bigger. So the other thing I want you to realize is The majority of the costs sitting in overhead and the most controllable, the same thing in your direct costs, is people. And I'm going to warn you right now, we're going to spend a lot of time in that area because that's where you're losing a ton of money. And a lot of people learned, thanks to COVID, they were carrying too many people. But you know, they've always been carrying too many people, and we want to get that dialed in. So once we get those four areas covered on the P&L, another secret treasure is your balance sheet. And there's really only three ways, and for some of you, only two ways where you're going to find cash in your balance sheet. One thing that I want you to be careful of when you're looking at your balance sheet is I want you to look at ratios. Because just because a number went up or just because a number went down is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. So when we look at ratios, which is how our balance sheet relates to our income statement. So for example, receivables is the first one that I want to raise, is your job is to speed up the collection of receivables. And you can't see that by looking at the actual balance. You can only see that by looking at how your actual receivable balance aligns with the revenue you're creating. So the first way we generate cash in companies is we get them focused on shrinking the days receivable outstanding. The second way we get you to focus on your balance sheet that applies to everyone is how do we use our vendors to give us basically free capital? So if you work on your terms that they find okay, and you match it up with how you have to match terms for what you're paying out or how you collect from your customers, you better match that. You're basically getting free financing. So our job is actually to try to extend our payable days without damaging our relationships. And then the last thing you can do is inventory speed. And I got to tell you, there was over $1 million in excess inventory sitting in Cure Labs. It was just a big treasure pot. They were just not managing inventory properly. And because it doesn't flow through their P&L until they have the revenue to match it, they just weren't looking at it. And that's why they had negative cash flow and didn't realize it. Folks, those are the only 7 ways, these 7 ways up on your screen to improve financials. Now, I told you 21 ways to improve them, right? There's only 3 ways to improve them, and we're going to be going through this now. The first one, which is showing up last on my screen, but the most important one, is the right people in the right seats doing the right things. And the higher the percentage of employees we have that doing that, the more cash you have. The second thing is we got to find the mistakes in our processes, the mistakes in our business model, so to speak, because when we reduce those mistakes, cash just shows up. And there's usually some that are costing you a lot of money. The last thing that you can do is you can improve your business model. Let me just get to work here. Let me start giving you some examples. And let's get to work on the big one. So I have never had anyone fill out the calculator and not have at least $1 million that was getting lost in people. Let's figure out why. So first, I want to change the way you look at not only people, but that cost line item on your P&L. So I want you to start thinking about your P&L as revenue and investments. And those people are assets. If you're using the traditional paradigm of human resources, you're in trouble. I want you to use the new paradigm of human capital management. And basically what that says is people are assets and not resources. When we have resources, we just use them and then we throw them away. When we have assets, we want to find the very, very best asset. We want to take care and grow that asset. And obviously we want to get a long life out of our asset. And that's what people's all about. And I want you to start thinking about that payroll number as a multiplier rather than a percentage of a revenue and an expense. And it's really, really important because what we're finding in businesses, and I'm a big labor efficiency junkie, and if you haven't read Greg Crabtree's book, Simple Numbers, that'll teach you everything you need to know about the labor efficiency ratio. But what I've learned by working with this is that we had to start capturing the cost of all those poor performing employees. Because one of the things I've learned over time is it costs us anywhere between 4 and 27 times revenue when we have a poor leader, a poor manager. And obviously it's as low as 4 when we're dealing with leaders that are at the front lines, those supervisors, and the 27 is the CEOs that can't get out of their own way, that are compromising everybody else in the company. So in our example here, what you're going to see is for every dollar you're spending in payroll, you should be getting a multiplier of somewhere, and I'm going to lower it all the way down to 5 times. So when you keep that manager that's not performing because they're really smart but horrible managers, or they know a lot about your industry but are horrible managers, they're costing you 5 times their salary. And then when you go below that and you start looking at your team members, we talked with Greg Crabtree, and now we've looked at hundreds of companies. And what we figured out is a good barometer, if you don't know your labor efficiency or where it should be, is on average about 2.5 times their salary. Now, a few of you may be having trouble with this. You may be looking at your business and saying, well, at least the person produces something. Why would I do the whole 2.5 times? What you're not realizing is when you have a poor performer, they slow everyone else in the business down, everyone around them. You as their leader or the other manager who's their leader, they're slowing people down. So even though they're contributing, they're actually a subtraction rather than a multiplier. And they should be a multiplier. So we've got to push more of our people to be multipliers. The other thing that I want you to think about is the cost of open positions. So I remember one of my clients, she's like, Howard, this is not a big issue for us. We don't hire that many people. And I was trying to tell them they needed to hire an HR person. They were like, but that costs $75,000 a year. I just can't see spending that. And I don't want to hire recruiters. So I said, all right, first of all, let's figure out how many people you've turned over in the last year and how many people you really hired. She's like, it's so few. And then all of a sudden her team started rattling off, and they were able to rattle off 20 names. She's like, oh my God, I didn't realize we hired 20 people this year. And most of them turned over a couple times. So now if you get back to that multiplier, what you're going to figure out is for a $50,000 position, every month that it's open, it's costing you $10,400. And for every week it's open, it's costing you $2,400. And all I'm doing is taking that $50,000, doing the 2.5 times and dividing it by the months and by the year. So now if you look at your business, and on average, most of our clients, let's take out this little small window here, always have 2 to 3 positions open at least, and many of our clients 10 or more open at every given time. So what I want you to realize is this leap, the faster you can recruit, the better you can get at recruiting, the better you are at building benches of potential candidates, the more money that shows up on your income statement. Because the reality is you wouldn't fill a position unless you expected to get a return. At least I hope not. All right, another thing I want you to look at payroll. So I had a client that last year when things were great, he needed 2 more leaders. And he got stubborn because the market, the people that he wanted for each of these positions wanted about $25,000 more than what he thought the positions were worth. So he let it go and he let it go and he let it go. 9 months later, I went back to my client. I'm like, all right, so what does this cost you? This $25,000 for each one of these people. And when we sat back and we looked at it, it had cost him $1 million in lost business. It had cost them in burning out his leadership team. It cost them in losing jobs with existing customers. And it really damaged their reputation because they didn't have enough structure in place. So they slowed down. So what I had to get them off of is the cost of an individual position and what you think payroll should be. So look at Walmart versus Costco. And I had to use Walmart because they didn't break out what I needed to look at in Sam's Club. But what I want you to see is Costco pays 60% more, about 60% more in payroll per hour for their people versus Walmart. And look at the productivity they're getting out of their employees. 3 times the revenue per employee. $1,118 square foot, almost double in revenue per square foot. And look at their turnover. It's no mistake that they really grow their assets, take care of their assets, and they get rewarded by low turnover, which is also contributing to this higher productivity. So be very, very careful in how you look at what you want to pay somebody. Another thing that I want to leave you with, and honestly, folks, I could spend this whole time talking about people and and I'm going to say us, all the leadership mistakes we make in the people area, it's costing us a ton. One of them that's really costing you is accepting mediocrity. So I want to get in the definition of your head, somebody in your company is not performing unless they're living all of your core values. And usually every position should have 2 to 3 KPIs that they're being held accountable to on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. If they're missing any piece of that, they are not performing. And you've got opportunity and you're leaving money on the table. They're only performing when they're giving you both. This is super important because when we go into most companies and we ask, okay, so what is the KPI for so-and-so? Oh, we don't have one for that person. Well, what about this person? We haven't figured it out yet for them. So basically you have people coming to work and they don't even know whether they had a good day or a good week, let alone you. So you're just working on, do I like them? Do they work a lot of hours and so forth? And I'm going to tell you, you probably have more employees than you need if you just dialed in this KPIs, and those people would perform more. And I'll give you an example. One of my clients had me sit down with their top producer, and that top producer generated more revenue than everyone else put together. And when we sat down and I challenged him, we figured out he could increase his book by 10 times, but no one was pushing him. They were actually afraid of him. And he wasn't motivated because everyone else on his team sucked. So I sat him down and I became his challenge. We started pushing him to add some of those large accounts that could replicate what he had. And they started moving in the direction of the 10 times just by setting and putting the gauntlet and getting that person committed to it. So I'm going to tell you way too much mediocrity. So how does this work through the calculator? If you were to go through our calculator right now and start filling it out, you'd identify how many managers and how many staff members are not performed. And there's a different line item for each. Here's an example of a real company, and they actually had 10 staff, about 20% of their workforce. And by the way, rarely do we go in a company and you're doing better than 20% of your workforce truly performing. So we sat down and we figured out that because they allowed 10 people not to perform, it was costing them $1,250,000 in net profit and $1 million of cost in cash. There's your $1 million number. And we find this in most organizations. So obviously if you're smaller, it's going to be, it could be better unless you have more non-performers, which may be the case. And if you're larger, this number is bigger. And we do the same thing for managers. And then we get them to calculate the cost of open positions. So I gave you the example, most of our clients have 3 open every single month. That's costing them $562,500 every year and $480,000 in cash. And don't get caught up in the numbers now. You'll get the formulas on how to all do this. The calculator will show you how to do it. I just want you to see, these are real numbers, folks. This is not made up. We find this in every single business. So I really want you to look at people. Now to keep us moving and to leave time so that we can have more dialogue and maybe some real life examples with all of you, because you all just don't want to hear me puff and wind. We'll go to the bottom half. So you'll see the top half of the calculator up here was all about people and calculating your people costs. Down here is getting at the other 2 levers to move the 7 financial levers. So this is about innovation and it's about mistakes. And you have it going everywhere in your business. If you look at your business, it's a bunch of processes. And I want you to think about processes are just like your garages and closets. We clean them up and then they become a disaster. Hopefully you clean them up and they become a disaster again. When you clean them up, they become a disaster again. What's also different about processes from there is not only do we have to clean them up, we can continually improve. Think about Six Sigma, every quarter, how to get them better. The key is figuring out where. And I'll tell you the reason I created this calculator. I was pretty frustrated. I remember in the $20 billion company, in the $6 billion company, where I had a seat at the table, we would create plans and then something else would happen. We would create plans and it was BS. It was, I remember telling the CEO of when he first came into Ryder, when I was the head of strategy there, he says, what do we need to do with our planning process? I said, cancel it. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, we got all these brilliant financial people, and they basically do go through fanatical amounts of detail to get to precisely the wrong number. So they can make all their spreadsheets add up, but we never argue enough in the room of how those numbers come to life. And by the way, Ryder had missed their numbers every single quarter almost since I had been there and had lost trust in the public markets. And I said, I want to do something that actually can build confidence in the public markets and also energize our team. So we shifted our focus to more of a focus like this and actually used Leaky Bucket at that time to reinvigorate a company that, by the way, is one of the best in their industry, but was not near as good as they could be. And so we went through and we sat with the team. The first area we're always going to look at with you, and we're going to challenge you, and I'm going to say 80% or more of companies either have no strategy, real business model that's different from their competition, have a unique mix of value compared to their competition, and or it's a weak one. And too many leaders are arrogant that because they've had some success, they get really excited about it. But I'm going to tell you, if you're not growing 20% or more every quarter, and yes, you can have a blip for COVID, but you've got to be able to get back up to being able to grow at a normal level. You definitely have to be growing 3 times or more than your competition, or we have work to do in this area. But I also want to alert you, everything's pivoted right now. And I gave you the example of where, my colleague, he had to pivot. He had to go to the virtual events management business. He was facing possibly 9 months of no events. So he moved to where the world moved. Companies like Kodak, Blockbuster, Toys R Us, these companies up here, these were Goliaths. These were staples in our community. And now they're all gone. So I don't want to scare you, but I want you to take strategy seriously. Strategy is what's going to get that top line growing. Poor strategy is you're going to be like I was, all right? I was working. The only reason I was successful for many of those years is I worked 3 times harder than everyone else. It wasn't because I was smarter than everyone else. I was actually a dumb leader because I was just carrying all the weight, and maybe a few of my other leaders were carrying all that weight. So one of the things we put into the calculator, you're going to see it, is I want you to calculate what a strategy is costing you. So this is an example of a client that was growing 5%, and there was definitely opportunity in their industry to grow actually 20%, which is where we got them. And actually they got a little bit higher, where most companies in their industry on average were growing at 5%. We actually raised the bar there to 20%. And what I found, and the reason I thought the calculator is kind of a game changer, is by calculating what you're leaving on the table, it creates more urgency. It actually creates more vigor, and sometimes we just get pissed off. We can't believe we're burning that much money, and it's right there for us to grab, and we're not grabbing it. So what you'll see here is by improving their growth rate from 5% to 20% over a 3-year period, you got to think about this compounded growth rate and what it does for your valuation. That means this $10 million company over 3 years would leave $5.2 million of revenue on the table if they stayed complacent with being just average with everybody else, and profit by doing that and not even changing their gross margin, which were $2.6 million, compounding it over 3 years, and over $2 million of cash. And when you think about your valuations, I want you all thinking valuation, you eventually want to exit. Whatever your cash number is in an individual year, multiply that usually by 4. And it's a good barometer to get you started in thinking about, it's not only a $600,000 cash impact, it's a $2.4 million valuation impact. And I want you to think about with all of these. So I mentioned earlier how important pricing was. And I'm going to tell you, particularly in this market, most people are afraid of pricing. And I'm going to tell you that is where you need to be thinking about, because it's the most valuable. So we sat in a room. Pelican Wire is one of the leaders in their industry. And they had done everything possible. They had built Six Sigma in the company. Everybody learned lean. They kept reducing their costs. And all they did was eat the improvements because they didn't change pricing with their clients. So they had cut all their costs as far down as they could, and profits were not going anywhere. So then I asked the magic question: what can we do in terms of pricing? And they had probably 1,000 SKUs of, and they make this fine wire for manufacturing equipment. And there was about 10 SKUs that they offer that no one else on the planet could deliver. And I said, when was the last time you increased any prices? And they were like, over 10 years. I said, I got to imagine your labor's gone up quite a bit over the 10 years. They said, yeah. And I said, what do you think, if you were to reprice this today, you think it should be? They came up with that number. And then we asked the room, if you went back to your clients and said, this is what your price is today, would they even blink? And the answer was no. So in those 10 SKUs alone, and remember they had 1,000 SKUs, they made a $500,000 profit opportunity for their company after they subtracted commissions. They were going to go back after that and figure out all the other SKUs. This was $1 million opportunity. They already had the business and they were giving it away. I want to challenge you not to be afraid in this market to charge what you're worth. The other thing, and this is kind of one of my favorite operational mistake stories. This is a company that was Hospital Physicians Partner. I didn't put their thing up there because they don't exist anymore. They went up selling. Not too long after this, we helped them dramatically increase their valuation. And the biggest opportunity, so we had 24 leaders in the room, $250 million plus company. We broke them all out with the calculator and we put them into competitive teams to suit who can find the most money filling out the calculator. One idea was worth over $25 million, a 10% improvement into net. And what it was this. So what their company did was they helped emergency rooms outsource to them to kind of help them better manage the doctors and the efficiency and the profitability of emergency room. And there was a change through the insurance companies that required them to check a box for something they were already doing or they would not get the money. And what they found was on most cases, the doctors were forgetting and the administrators were not checking this box. And it really had to start with the doctor. So man, they got super excited. This was so easy to implement. Every day in their daily huddle was check the box, check the box, check the box. And the money just started showing up. You couldn't get through a day where somebody didn't remind you to check that box. Folks, I can give you other examples of where we made one process change in a sales process and it went from 20% close ratio to 80% close ratio. These are leadership and management mistakes, and you're just accepting mediocrity because that's the way it's always been. And it doesn't have to be that way. Let me give you an innovative opportunity. So we do a lot of work with restoration contractors, construction companies, and as you know, in the construction industry, a lot of those folks are not technology savvy, they're tradespeople, they don't really leverage technology, and a lot of great technology showed up in the restoration industry. And this client wasn't using it. So we found the two best technologies for them to use and apply into every job in their business. And they added 600 basis points to gross margin. A reminder, folks, they already had the business. They already had the cost structure. So that 6% went straight to their bottom lines. And it was right there to have, but they had so much inefficiency in the processes that technology allowed them to pull out. You know, another example of this is an advertising company that all they worked with was franchises. And many of you probably have heard Orange Theory. They're all over the country. That was one of their clients. And one of the problems they had was every time a new franchisee joined, they had to go through their system. It took 2 or 3 weeks to get them up and running. Not only that, it took a lot of man hours and it touched like 3 or 4 different people in the CEO's company. So using technology, they figured out how to actually get the client to implement certain information, certain basic information, push a button, and then it was done in minutes. So what was taking weeks was now done in minutes. And there was very, very, if any, labor interaction with his company. So now he just freed up 3 people and accelerated not only cash for his clients, but for himself. That's what innovation's all about. So this is where I want you to write your one thing. I shared 21 different ways for you to look at your income statement. I demystified it, and we talked about either innovating in those 7 financial statement levers, improving your process, or getting much, much better at getting, keeping, and growing people and managing them to a lower labor efficiency. So now I'm going to take a moment. I want you to write in your chat box, because I want your peer groups to hold you accountable. What's the one thing you're going to go back and implement it? And it's worth at least $100,000. It should be probably $500,000. Otherwise, you've got your company focusing on the wrong priorities. Waiting for that chat box to fire up. I'm not letting you guys off the hook. There we go. Now we're moving. Now we're talking. I want you to get money. I want this to be $1 million day for you folks. You use this calculator every time you create a priority on your planning, your quarterly planning. I want you to put a dollar amount next to it. If you can't come up with a dollar amount next to it, excuse my language, it's bullshit. All right. You have to be able to calculate. And then I want you to go after the big numbers, not the easy stuff, not the convenient stuff, not the things you think you ought to do. I want you to go after the big items. And you should have 2 or 3 processes that you're going to be taking up to another level every single quarter. Now, I promised I was going to give you access to all this stuff. So I'm going to go even bigger. So I was talking to my team. My 2nd edition of Your Business is a Leaky Bucket is ready, but not in the market yet. I'm going to give it to you for free. In that book, there's an extra chapter all about the calculator, how to fill it out, what to do with it, and there's a few other extra chapters. In there, there's 15 ways every quarter you can be thinking about how to generate more cash. And all you need to do is type the words leaky to the text number 38470. That's leaky to 38470. Now, it's going to come back. It's going to ask you your name and ask you an email address. After that, I'm not going to ask you for your social security number, your firstborn. I want to help. I want to be part of what Jeff talked about and just coming out and playing to win here as we come out of this. And this tool is going to be a ticket for you to get back on offense. In the book, it's going to give you a link to how you actually get that tool. The last challenge I'm going to have to you is, I know you're in peer groups. I'm in 2 of them. I'm in a coaches peer group that I created several years ago. I'm in a CEO peer group. I also have 2 coaches. And I'm going to take this from, there's a book called The $1 Trillion Coach. And honestly, I was pissed off when it came out, because I've only created $1 billion of value, and this guy created trillions of dollars worth of value. So now I've just raised my bar. I got to get up to that trillion. But what was important here is the book was written by Bill Campbell's clients. Bill Campbell passed away, and he was always very humble. But one thing that was in common, Zuckerberg, Eric Schmidt, all the guys from Google, Steve Jobs from Apple, they all had Bill Campbell as a coach. And what they said clearly in this book is they never would have created $1 trillion worth of value if this guy wasn't whipping their you-know-whats. And I'm going to tell you, that's what my coach does for me. So you don't have to hire me, right? I'm just throwing this up here. The reason I'm putting my name and phone number up there is I really want to get you started coming out of Corona. I'm offering for free, no strings attached. We refuse to sell anybody anything for this. If you want help, we'll sit down virtually with your leadership team and help you fill out that calculator, help you find your $1 million. And that would be my gift to the Corona community to kind of get this out. And so without that, that's what I got. I think we're up to questions and answers here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've got a couple pages of notes here, and I'll get the question started. Thank you for offering to give everybody the book for free, and thank you for offering to help everybody fill out that calculator thing for free. That's fantastic. One question is, if sometimes, you know, people get used to what they have to do or don't have to do. And if the CEOs watching this maybe don't have all the KPIs in place that they wish they did or should have, and they go to implement some of these things, there's sort of that resistance versus if it had just always been that way and everybody knows it, expects it, and it's just very common. Do you have any advice for if you haven't been disciplined with KPIs to implement with that resistance, and how to get you know, the KPIs that they determine these are important KPIs to get them sustained and and past that?
So great question. Thank you so much for answering. I'm going to break it into two pieces.
Okay.
So first of all, and I found this even when I hired my coach, was when people hire us. You know, I've been in the change business my entire career, even when I was inside companies. And one of the things I found, which is why I want you to think about, you know, the dollar amounts and all of that, is you will never change unless you want something bad enough. All right. You've got to want it really bad. And then you've got to be willing to do whatever it takes. And so the reason people don't follow through is either they haven't gotten in their mind, they really need this bad enough. And so it's a nice idea. We play around with it, but we don't follow through because we haven't made the commitment. And I find that when you see it's $1 million issue or more, we're a little bit more committed. But that still doesn't mean you're willing to do whatever it takes. And that's a lot of times where a coach or one of your peers in your peer groups come in handy, because now, let's be honest, you know, to get what you want to get that you've never gotten, you're going to get out of your comfort zone. And it's going to be real easy, like a rubber band, to start stretching the rubber band because you start implementing KPIs and you're doing all that. People are pushing back. It's uncomfortable to just let the rubber band go and sling back. What you have to be able to do is mindfully be able to step out of that rubber band and now see the world differently. And so the couple of things that I found is, and I've been trained in neurological linguistic programming, and it's fascinating stuff, is first of all, none of us know the truth because we only take in 1% of the information that's in front of us. So even in my room right now, I'm concentrating on you guys. I'm not seeing on what's going on the sides behind me. I'm not seeing what's on the shelf behind me, the shelves in front of me. I'm just focused here right now. And it's causing me not to see the other 99% of what's going on. And then I build my truth in my head based on that 1%. And it's bullshit, folks. So what we have to do is, the first thing we have to do is figure out what's the assumption that gets us to do what we're doing today. And then you've got to challenge your team is, what are alternative assumptions that we just haven't allowed ourselves to lock in, or we're just going to lock in just like my friend did. I want to become an events management business online. Yeah. We're shifting our thing right now, but you've got to shift your mindset and then glue in and lock into that. And then you've got to realize another thing, because you mentioned, now you're going to start putting KPIs in places. This is not to penalize people. This is to help them, you know, think about it this way. If you went to a sporting event and there was no scoreboard, how excited would you be about that sporting event? I'm not excited at all, right? But as soon as you start putting numbers up and I see, oh, my name's next to, I'm supposed to be getting rebounds and I don't have enough, I'm now motivated because I don't want to fail you. I don't want to fail my team. And that's my job, is rebounds. So now I'm going to hyper focus on that. And so we get people hyper focused. It actually becomes psychologically motivating as long as they're realistic.
Well, thank you. And I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We usually get them in and get them out within the hour. I want to make sure we get in any other questions from you guys. If you want to put it in the chat, I can read it out. Well, anybody wants to add a question at the end there. You mentioned pricing is real important, even more than increasing the volume. Any advice on increasing the confidence to be able to increase the pricing?
So did you say competence or confidence?
Confidence, like to feel confident, like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to charge more, because isn't that like the biggest barrier? People are just fearful that.
So they're fearful of losing clients. Now there's a couple of stages to this. First of all, so in the Pelican Wire example, they had a competitive advantage. They had a product that no one else had, right? You should have lots of confidence that you actually own the market on this product. You actually set price. They don't. because they can't get it anywhere else. So you're going to have situations like that. So that's an extreme. But the other part is many people aren't able to do it because you haven't solved your strategy problem. You haven't created a unique mix of value that's super important to other people. And if the buyer doesn't find it super important, then it can be a train wreck. So I'm not going to deny it. But the reality is usually it's in your head. And we've seen this from business after business. If you raise prices, say 2%, no one notices the 2%. But that 2%, as you saw, 1 + 1 + 1 to the bottom line is huge in terms of growth and profitability. It could be a 42% growth in your bottom line. So I'm not saying, raise your prices crazy.
Right.
Raise them a little bit, recapture some of that. And
Right.
if your customers really value you, they're going to pay the value that you're delivering.
Got it. We have time for one last question. Anybody wants to chat it in there at the buzzer beater cue? Um, One last question would be if leaky buckets are caused by inefficiencies, what are great ways to detect those inefficiencies?
So, the easiest way to detect them is you have KPIs, and I recommend 1 or 2 for every role in your company. When you see that, and then you actually know, and you keep raising the bar on what the standard needs to be, it's going to kind of point you in the direction. Uh, One of the biggest reasons this is happening is there's usually no accountability at the leadership level. There's more accountability below the leadership level, and you've surrounded yourself with mediocre leaders. So I want to challenge you. What are the 2 or 3 things that would never happen if you didn't have those leaders? And I'm going to tell you, one of them is labor efficiency. Start calculating that down to labor efficiency, and you're going to find some of those managers, you may love them, they may be family, but they suck. And you've got to get rid of them and get the right person, because the right person is going to want to get that labor efficiency up because they know what their biggest thing they manage is people. And they're going to find the KPIs and they're going to keep finding levers. And then every planning cycle, bring every single leader into the room and say, all right, what's the one measure, if I actually expose you to everybody in your industry right now, you'd be the most embarrassed about? That's the one we want them to focus on. Or which KPI do you think we can even increase 1%? Remember the 1% rule. So one of my clients, and they've stayed with us through Corona, and they've already re-upped for the next year, and our contract's not even done. We used 1 + 1 + 1 as a theme with every employee in the company. So that meant everybody had to think about every month, every quarter, how do I improve 1%? And it was worth tripling their bottom line.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Keep
Amazing.
it simple.
Yeah. So guys, take them up on the offer to get that book for free. Take them up on that offer to get some help going through and filling in that calculator. Thank you so much for your time, for all the examples and case studies that you shared. Thank you guys for being here. I'll send a replay of this too if you wanted to go watch a particular thing he said at a certain point. And for those of you guys that are watching this on the replay, have a great rest of the day. Thank you, Howard, for being here, and we'll see you guys at the next upcoming meeting. I'll talk to you soon.